Okay, hello everybody. So Mark will present us his recent work on the method finder tools. Yeah, I'm right. I'm correct.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So you will share your screen so we can see your work. Thank you.
All right. Are you seeing my terminal window now?
No.
Let me try that again.
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to
Oh.
share my whole screen, not just a window. So share my screen, share this screen. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm in a terminal window and I'm going to start Cuis up in the kind of normal way. And I kind of have a side question here. Should it be possible for me to double click on the image instead of starting it this way? I noticed that I pulled down a fresh release this morning and tried that again. And what happens is that if I try to quit out of the image when I start it by double clicking, then I get an error and it locks up. Maybe I ought to demonstrate that real quick. So here, if I go over to where I have all my Quis images, and this was pulled down just this morning, and so I'm going to double click that, and there we go. And all I'm going to do is immediately say quit without saving. Yes, boom. And let me make this bigger so you can see it. Uh, so I guess the first question is, should I be able to start an image just by double clicking it instead of running one of the run scripts?
Yes, you should. I've been doing that many times. What I usually
Yeah,
do, I double click on the VM and then I select the image, but you can do the other way too. But I
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
about this error. I think something maybe it just should change. I don't know.
yeah. So at this point, I can't even quit out of it normally. I have to force quit it. Okay, well, we'll leave that behind now. And now I'll start it from the script and make this bigger. And I want to demonstrate kind of a setup that I do that's also going to pull in my method finder. So if I open a workspace and I say feature require, and then I have this package RMV setup where RMV is my initials. And I imagine all of you like to arrange your windows in a certain way when you start up a new image. And that's the goal of this. And so I do that, and it's setting up all of my preferences for me. And the arrangement of the windows looks much better on my home monitor, which is really wide monitor. It's not quite as impressive here. But I want to show you how it did that. So if I come over to RMV setup and I look at my initialize method, this is just setting up some basic preferences. But I also have this line that is just making it shorter, the code, so that I can tile an image. And to show you what that did, I have this kind of nice small talky background image that's tiled. And so that's a part of my setup. But then look at this part here, open windows. And here's the open windows method. And this I think is really cool. So here I say, I want to open a browser and I want to hold on to a handle to that thing. And I'd like that browser to be full height. And I want its X to be in the center of the world and its Y to be at the top of the world. And that's this browser that we're looking at right here. And so it opened it up and made it the full height and centered it the way I wanted. And then I say, I'd like a second browser, and I want it to be the full height minus the height of the taskbar. And it should be to the left of browser. That's this one. And so I closed that one already, but there was a browser over there. And its Y is at the top of the world. And then I want a workspace opened, and it should be 70% of the height of my world. And its X should be at the right of the browser, and it should be at the top of the world. And I think I already moved this one, but here, let me close this. And yes, I'm going to close this one. So that's this workspace here. It's 70% of the height. And then right after that, I have a transcript that's 30% of the height. and it's also to the right of that initial browser, and it's at the bottom of the world. And I want to clear it out. And then I want message names to be opened up, and it should be at the right of the world and at the top. So that's in the upper right corner. And then I want this installed packages window, and that should be at the left of the world, and its Y is at the top of the taskbar. And so you see it's floating right above the taskbar. And then that initial browser I opened, I want to activate it. So this is kind of a side note here, but I think this is a really cool way to set up your environment the way that you want whenever you're starting up a new image. So if you're interested in that, you could look at this RMV setup package. I don't expect anyone to want to use that as is, but the part where it has support for these methods to position windows may be something that you might want to borrow. So let's move on to the message finder part. So I'm going to open up method finder. And then just a really basic example is I can say, well, what if the receiver is 2 and the argument is 2 and the result that I expect is 4? What methods would do that for me? And I click find methods and it tells me all of these would give me that result. So this is a very basic example, but a more interesting one might be to say, what happens if I have an array with the numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then the argument is a block that takes a number x and it returns that number times 2, and then the result that I expect is an array with 2, 4, and 6. What methods would do that for me? And finds these 3. Now the collect is expected. The replace maybe is a little surprising, but what's really surprising is this one here. And so I can click on it and I trace this down all the way to a primitive, and it's still not quite clear to me why that method would produce that result. But that aside, I think this is an interesting way to find methods that take certain arguments, pass to a receiver and give you some result, or pass to a method of the receiver. So jump over to here, and just to check, is everybody still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to step through this in just a bit more detail. So it's a tool for finding methods on a given receiver that take given arguments and give you some result. And I have this set up so that I can get to it from the open menu. And we already saw what it looks like. Here's that same example that I showed, but I want to point out that this builds heavily from work that Mariano has done on his search browser. And because it depends on that package, when you install this package, that comes along for the ride. And so maybe if you didn't want that, I need to package this in a different way so it can be truly standalone. But it definitely builds on classes that Mariano created so that it wasn't too hard for me to come up with this window where I could list some methods. And then if you click on one, you get to see the code in the bottom. I didn't have much work to do because Mariano had already created a class that did that. I can also run this from a workspace. And so if I say method finder method 4, and then I pass it an array, and it treats the first element of the array as the receiver, and the last one as the expected value, and all the ones in the middle are the arguments. And so in this case, there's just one argument. And I get the same results that you'd expect, but it just prints out the names of those methods in the transcript. So installing this is like any other Cuis-Smalltalk package. You can clone my repository and open a workspace and require method finder. Now, this is something that exists in Squeak, and this is where I got the idea to do this. I thought that was really cool and was missing having that available in Cuis. But one thing that you notice is that it's not outputting as many methods as I found in Cuis. And I'll talk in just a bit about how my implementation differs from the Squeak implementation. So the way that mine works is that you're entering in strings for the receiver and the arguments and the expected value, and those are just Smalltalk expressions. And so I compile them with compiler evaluate, and that gives me an object. I wanted it to be the case that I could display a nice error message if you entered something invalid, but I never was able to get to that point. I can certainly determine that what you've entered is not a valid Smalltalk expression, but I wasn't able to get a nice error message telling why it's invalid. And so maybe someone has some ideas about how I could do better there. But then I go to that receiver and I ask it for all the selectors that are in its class and in all of its superclasses using that expression at the bottom. Then I take that long list and I need to get rid of some of them. Clearly, I don't need the ones that take a different number of arguments than what you've specified, so I get those out of the set. Then I have this set in method finder that's called skip set, and that is a list of methods that I do not want to call. And I'll talk more about why that is, I think, on the next slide. Then anything that is understood by behavior or change set or class description, I don't really want to be calling those. Those are potentially dangerous methods. Then anything that has the word halt in it seems like a bad idea to call. Or anything that's doing a file out or handle failing, those seem like problems. And as you might imagine, this was a long series of trial and error for me to determine what are the things I should not be calling as I'm trying to find methods that give me some expected result. So then when I'm ready to actually call these methods, some methods can do bad things to the receiver or bad things to the arguments. And so to avoid that, I create very deep copies of both of those. And then I use perform with arguments. I pass it the selector, and I'm running this on the receiver copy, passing it the copy of the arguments. If I get an error, I just pretend like the result was nil, and then that's not going to match your expected value, and so I won't be displaying that selector. The next thing that I ran into is that sometimes you want to find methods that return a floating point value, and you certainly don't want to have to specify exactly what the value should be. And so here I'm saying that if the actual result I got back is a float, and you were expecting a float, well, then I'm just going to see what the difference is between those. And for the purposes of identifying a selector, as long as it's pretty close, I'll count that as a match. But if either of those were not a float, then it has to match exactly. And then I take the selectors that pass all of this and I sort them, and then that's what I display. So back to why I shouldn't call some methods. Well, there are a lot of things that methods could do that I want to avoid. There's some methods that modify existing classes or their methods in bad ways, like deleting them. It could prompt for input. It could produce a bunch of output that I don't want to see. It could just be very slow to run, or it could even crash the image. And a couple of examples I ran across are remove from system that forgets the receiver out of the global dictionary. And then all of the instances that you had become obsolete at that point. Or shutdown seems like a really bad thing to do. So that's why I'm filtering out a bunch of methods and not attempting to invoke them. And so this brings up how my implementation differs from the way this works in Squeak. In the Squeak implementation, which I didn't look at before I created mine, and I'm glad I didn't, because if I would have looked at it, I might have given up and not put in the work. But Squeak ends up constructing a list of kind of approved selectors, and those are the only ones it's going to try. And so that's good because you're never going to do something dangerous and damage your image. But it's very bad, I think, because it can never find the things that you are introducing or new things that were added to existing classes because it's only working from its approved list. So for that reason, I like my implementation a lot better. So I think this was an interesting exercise to go through. I certainly learned a lot working on this. It's potentially dangerous. I think I've done a good job filtering out all the dangerous methods, but maybe I missed one, and if you run it, maybe it will invoke something that you wish it wouldn't have. So yeah, I'm interested in feedback on this, on different ways I might be able to improve it. And if you want a copy of these slides, the URL down here at the bottom is where you'll find those. And also the actual code. So that's it. Any questions about that?
Thank you, Mark.
So cool work. I like it. I'm gonna use it at the university because I tried to migrate the Squeak method finder a couple of years ago. Very difficult. It was a mess, the implementation. So I will give it a try to this one and let you know what the students say.
Excellent. Yeah, I love it because for me, it's a problem to remember all the methods that we have, for example, in collections, and having this kind of tool to quickly match the appropriate method for a task is not a dangerous a task, by the way, and a really helpful tool for me. So yeah, I want to use it. Excellent. I should have mentioned when I was talking about comparing floating point values that where I first ran into the need for that is when I wanted to ask the float class if it had a method that could return the value of pi. And so I just entered float as the receiver, just the name of the class, with no arguments. Then I said the expected value is 3.1416. And it wasn't finding it initially until I modified the code to
Mm.
compare floating point values that way.
Cool. I remember that this quick method finder, you could avoid entering the parameters or the receiver, and in if I'm not wrong, is that correct? Have you tried that in the Squeak version of Method Finder or not?
You said I could avoid entering the
Yeah,
receiver?
yeah, you could just. I have to look at it, but you could, for example, instead of saying uh, I want the receiver to be 3, you could just enter a dot, and then you say I want the parameter to be 4 and the result to be 7. So it will, show you that 3 plus 4 could give you 7 and other things like that. So instead of entering all the three things, the receiver, parameters, and result, you could just leave one of them blank or, yeah.
Interesting. Would it
Yeah,
just assume that the receiver must be from the same class as the result?
I don't know. I don't know how it worked really, but I remember that you could do that, and
Hmm.
it's an interesting feature. Maybe
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can.
I didn't try that.
Yeah. We cannot hear you, Eze. We don't hear you.
Mark, I have one question.
Sure.
So because your implementation is different compared to the Squeak one, so you get more results. Did you try to compare? I know it's not very easy to do that because the image are different. But do you feel that you get more results?
Yeah, and I think that's because they have this approved list of selectors that they're
Mm,
going to attempt. And so if they don't have some things in their list, I can find them when they can't.
okay.
Yeah, I like your approach much better, Mark. I think it's better because, as you said, it can grow automatically on the selectors that we look for. You don't need to maintain that. That's great.
Right.
Yeah, nothing at all, Eze. We don't hear you.
Okay. So if I think Benoit has a question.
Yes, exactly. Have you tried measuring performance? Let's say you have a method that is implemented in object, and you drill it down to a very very little subclass. It would have to go through tons of classes. Well, basically, all classes except those that inherit from proto objects. So what does it look like?
Right. So just to find the methods on some class and all of its superclasses, that part is surprisingly fast. But sometimes I would get like several hundred selectors that I can try. But then it turned out that with that slide that I showed where I pare down what I'm going to look at, many of those were coming from classes like behavior and class description. So then it got pared down pretty quickly to a neighborhood of, say, 2 to 300 selectors. And then honestly, I was shocked at how quickly I could call 300 methods and see if the result matched. The only problem I had is that I did find a few methods that were just really slow. And in every case I found like that, it was clearly a method that I wasn't wanting to be calling anyway. And so I added it to my skip set. And then that went away. And so once I got that in place, I've never seen it take more than a second to give a result for anything I fed it. And I thought that was really impressive, not because of the way I coded it, but just in how fast Quis is.
So you don't cache anything like most people would look up stuff in collection and subclasses. So everything is dynamically generated and executed.
Yep, that's right. There's no caching at all.
I think that's in part because of the difference you would get from interpreted code like in Python and the bytecode, compiled bytecode.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's because Smalltalk is is great for this kind of meta programming things. It was designed with very slow machines with not that much memory, and its meta model is really amazing on how fast you can get implementers or how fast you can execute methods. So yeah, that I don't know. It's not a surprise for me that you can do that and it works that fast. Mark, I was going to ask you, do you know our work on live typing? Have you heard about it?
Yes, I've looked into that a bit. Yes. Very
Okay,
cool.
because yeah, because I think we could even improve the finding. Looking for the right selectors based on the types of the parameters and the receiver and so on. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that could be a nice
that's
improvement.
that's something that we could do as an um, you know um, how do you say this when you improve something
Yeah,
when yeah.
yeah, that'd be great.
Maybe I will ask some of my students to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be wonderful. I'd love to have some help with improving that.
Great.
We need a new release for the live typing image.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. The thing is,
I
we need a new VM. That's the problem.
I like to learn how to build a VM and a companion image for live typing. It's something I tried to explore it and I failed miserably.
So what I'm trying to do is, I'm sorry we're changing the subject, but the VM, I talked to Elliot, and he's gonna put the live typing code into the CI on the open Smalltalk VM continuous integration. So we won't have to worry about building a live typing VM anymore. About the image, it's kind of complicated, but I can show you the scripts. It's no problem for that.
Okay, we'll talk later.
Yes.
And about going back to Mark's tool, what you said earlier about being able to not fill every field. in the tool. I think I read an email from Boris Shingarov that hinted at this same thing. I don't know if it has to do with what something similar to what Prolog does, that you can run things backwards, and yeah, for me it's very interesting how these two things that at first seems separate are somewhat similar. An SAT solver and this method finder tool. It was something that I wouldn't have think of at first.
Yeah, it does seem very challenging to try to leave out one of them and discover it unless you make assumptions about what kind of object that's going to be. I mean, if you say that I've given you arguments and I've given you an expected value, but the receiver could be any kind of object, that seems really difficult.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it's also related to code generation. There is, besides Prolog, there is a language called Minikanren that does that. You give to it the output, and it builds the source code that generates the output as many times as you want.
Benoit, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how do you handle methods that just return the receiver regardless of the argument they're passed? Is it a thing that you can do?
Well, if you said that the expected value is the same as the receiver, oh, I see what you're saying, that because of the way I construct them with compiling the expression, I end up with two different objects, and then it wouldn't find it. It would think that they're different. Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess it doesn't handle that case. Yeah, I'm not sure how I would do that unless I would write the code to say, if any of the expressions you've entered are the same as another one, then reuse the object and don't compile and create a new instance. I could do that. I wonder if that would be a valid assumption for all cases, though. Maybe there's cases where you really wanted them to be different objects. Yeah, that's interesting. On a different topic, I've been trying to implement some new morphs recently, trying to think about what are all the things that people would like to have if they're implementing forms. So one example is a switch kind of component. I'm sure you've all seen that, where it's kind of an oval and there's a circle inside, and when you click it, the oval slides back and forth, and it could take the place of a checkbox, but kind of a fancy checkbox. And so I've implemented that, but as you might be aware, in the abstract vector canvas class, there is no method that draws an oval. And so I implemented that myself, and that got me to thinking, do we want to add any new drawing methods like that in abstract vector class? Like, would we want to have a method that draws an oval?
That's kind of a good question. What's the difference between an oval and an ellipse?
That the ends of it are arcs of a circle. So I mean, think about splitting a circle in half.
Yeah,
and
I
then drawing.
understand.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I understand. Yeah, an oval method that calls four arcs to draw an oval sounds like a useful addition to me. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I'll submit it and you can see
cool.
what you think of it.
Yeah, looks nice.
The way I
Sounds
implemented
nice.
it is that you're basically telling it what size you want the oval to be. And normally you would want the width to be greater than the height, but if you give it the opposite, then it will draw the oval vertically instead. It just automatically makes it either horizontal or vertical. But yeah, I'll send that to you and you can see what you think of it.
but it will always be. Um yeah, I mean it will always have a major and minor axes that are horizontal and vertical. And I guess that's also how ellipses work in quiz, so it would be consistent with that most likely. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you have done it, just submit it and let's take it from there.
sure.
And on an unrelated issue, the thing about double clicking an image, the main problem is to know what VM you're running. Okay, and I would expect if you run the same VM that you're distributing in the repo, the behavior should usually be the same. And if it isn't, it would be surprising. But if you're running some other VM that was installed by someone in your system, for instance, I believe that the farm installer likes to do that, then who knows? Okay.
Sure.
If you run a script, the script tells which VM to run, and it's always the one that is included in the repo. So that's so much safer that I don't see a good reason to do it otherwise.
Yeah, the only reason that I like clicking on the image files is that if I save a bunch of different images for different projects that I'm working on, then I end up having to write a script for each one to start up that image. And it would be more convenient if I could just click on the image and not have to write a script.
Yeah, but I don't think that it would be easy to make the system pick the correct VM for each one.
Yeah, so if that's the case I'm running into, then I would like to get rid of any extra VMs I have so that the only one that's on my machine is the one for Quis. And if that eliminates the problem, I'd be happy with that solution.
Usually, if you only use recent versions of Quiz, the last version of the Smalltalk VM should be okay. But if you also want to run older versions of Quiz, more than 10 years old, or any old versions of Squeak, or any version of Firewall, then you will need to tell the system what VM to run. And maybe macOS has a good way to do that, I don't know.
Okay.
I would say it doesn't, because the way to do it would be to inspect the first byte of the image to try to detect what kind of image it is and then pick the correct VM to run that. It's not impossible, but I'm not aware of anyone doing that, and it will be quite a bit of work.
Right. Um, on another note, I was under the impression that, at least in the Quis community, it's common to not think so highly about your images. Like those are just temporary things, and you save your code in packages, and you frequently start up new images and load in whatever packages you want. And so I was surprised recently when I think this was in a California Small Talkers meetup. Some of the people in that meeting seemed very proud to say, I've only ever created 5 images in my entire life, and I just keep using the same images. And I thought, that seems opposite of what the Quis community does. Am I
It's
right
the
about that?
opposite. Yes, you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The
Yeah, Ken, please.
yeah, I was gonna say there. My experience has been. Oh, I'm hearing a syndrome here. Sorry. My experience has been that.
You're
Wow.
in heaven, Ken. You're in like talking to us from a cloud.
Uh, anyway, my experience has been that that leads to code you can't reproduce. You can't reproduce something from directly from code over time, simply because of the nature of the change has evolved. And if you don't can't get reproduce something directly from code, SOL. I
Yes.
yeah. Sorry about the syndrome here. I'll
So
turn off the mic now.
Yeah, there are upsides and downsides of doing each in either style. Um, at some point, it's a personal preference. And yes, in the Squid community, there are a lot. of more classical small talkers, if you wish, that view the system closer to the original Smalltalk 80 vision that the system was the only operating system in the machine. Quiz doesn't, at least I don't follow that idea and I don't encourage it. I mean, people can do, of course, whatever they want, but I accepted a long time ago that there is another operating system that is running Quiz, and Quiz isn't the operating system anymore. Uh, and I think it derives from there, right? And also, as Ken said, if you work on an image for long and the image goes wrong, it's hard to recover your stuff. And if you use Git, for instance, or Subversion or Mercurial or any source code version system, those things work with text files. So if you want to version your code and store your code on online repositories where other people will be able to use them, all that works so much better if you treat your code as text. And related to that, and also to what Ken said, I think it's a good property for a system to be rebuildable, that you can rebuild the system so that you can know exactly what's in there and why it's there. And in that regard, the commercial small talks are in a way better than the open source small talks because they all start with a very small image and then load libraries on top of that. All the commercial small talks do that. So they kind of encourage you knowing what you loaded into that base image to build your big image. Then you can save the big image and then it's the same as Quick or Quiz or Far. But it's all related to all that.
Right.
If I may, I wanted to add that I programmed Smalltalk for a very long time professionally in a company, and we used VA Smalltalk or Visual H with a NV versioning system, and we always kept our images um, a few days, I would say. But it's really important that you have a way to recreate a new, fresh development images, and from time to time you need it. But it can be a time saver. In our case, it was a big time saver because loading or the creating a new development image took sometimes half an hour because loading everything from the or even longer. I cannot remember exactly. So I think it's both ways are possible, and it's a matter of personal preferences in this and in Smalltalk. It's kind of also a little bit a religious discussion. So yeah.
Benoit, you have a question?
Yes, as a small talk dinosaur, I guess it all depends on your environment and the number of classes or the size of the project. I usually worked in places where we had like in the tens of thousands of classes, so it would take a long, long time. As far as open source is concerned, I usually keep my image for quite a while, but I always keep a clean image on the side from which I'm trying to load stuff just to see if it loads fine and I have no errors. Otherwise, I feel comfortable with my stuff, my workspaces with notes and everything, but I always make sure that I'm not far enough from a point where it doesn't load.
Hernan, you want to share something?
I think Christian was before. Yeah, Christian, you wanna say something? Oh, okay. Uh, no, I don't have too much to add, but I was going to say that both situations are good. It's very important to recreate a new image from nothing, loading just code to be sure that everything works fine. But it's also interesting to keep your work, your flow of thoughts, saving the image and the things that you have tried and so on. So I use both. And before, when I was working in another company, what we had was a CI that every day created a fresh image loading everything and running the test to be sure that everything worked fine. So if you had to do a new story or whatever you want to call it, you took that image and started from there. But you could also save that image to, you know, to continue working the other day or whatever. So I think both things are, or both ways of working are interesting and important.
Mark, yes, please.
Yeah, so I'll share. I've also been using both approaches. I typically keep an image for several weeks while I'm developing something. But when it gets to the point that I'm ready to tell someone else, hey, you might be interested in this, well, then I'm going to open a brand new image, load in my package, make sure it's all working before I try to share it with anyone else.
Yeah, that's very important because in Smalltalk it's very easy to forget to add a method in an extension, or if you change something in a class that is not your own, it's very easy to forget to put that in your package. So that's why it's very important to reload the whole thing once in a while.
Yeah. So another thing I ran across in a California small talkers meeting is that I was sharing some code that happened to use the colon for chaining methods, and some people like reacted in horror. And maybe I wasn't aware at that point that that was unique to Quis. I actually like using that, but man, people outside the Quis community are not happy about that.
I don't use it.
What can I say? I mean, this is perhaps a bit of a too off-topic side note, but actually, when I started the quiz project, I started as a separate project from Squeak. I have been a member of the Squeak community since the start and have done a lot of things with Squeak and contributed code and code to the VM and the image and was part of a lot of discussions since 1997. And what made me decide to fork Squeak in a different project was exactly that. I needed freedom to change things, and the Squeak community is very conservative in that respect. So, what quizzes today would have not been possible uh, in Squeak and being the same thing as Squeak. Squeak, the Squeak community didn't want Squeak to diverge so much from what it had been. Yeah.
So I'll share one other thing. I've recently been trying to read as many books on Smalltalk as I can. I've only been using Smalltalk for a little under a year, and
I
just last
envy
night
you,
I.
Mark. How do you
What's
do
that?
that? I mean, I envy you. You're just reading all the small talk book and playing around with small talk. I envy you.
Yeah, it's been fun. So last night I finally finished reading the purple book. I already read the blue book. And one thing that really stood out to me about the purple book, I've never had this experience with another programming language before. Just talking about near the end when it's explaining compiled methods and bytecode and how the interpreter walks through the bytecode. I came away from that thinking, I kind of think I could write this myself. Like it was explained so well. There's no way I ever thought that about any other programming language.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a big mindset change with Smalltalk. Smalltalk is meant for you to be able to understand everything. That's a big power. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the great thing is that the Open Smalltalk VM is written in Smalltalk, so you can go and change the VM using Smalltalk, and you can try the changes that you did running the VM, simulating the VM in Smalltalk itself. So I'm not a VM expert, but I could write the live typing VM because of that. And when I showed that to Dan, he said that one of his goals when they created the Squeak and when they wrote the VM using Smalltalk, was for every Smalltalker to be able to also change the VM. So yeah, the whole idea of using Smalltalk for everything and to the purple um, the VM code is written in Smalltalk as examples and so on is just for everybody to understand, and it's great. It's something that you don't see in any other language. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great idea of the bootstrapping in itself that Alan and Dan had at that time. It's great. Yeah. When you realize that is when you don't want to go back.
Yes.
You go back to other language. You just want to say, okay, let's work on this forever.
Yeah. Well, that I'm in a unique situation now. I don't have to worry about being forced to go back to use any other language because as of this Friday, I'll be retired and I can do whatever I want. And so,
Congratulations.
I envy you
Yeah.
all. Um, you know,
so I can focus on small talk as much as I want then.
good, good.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it's
Um, after we switched themes, I realized I wanted to say that there are some other Smalltalk syntax extensions that are unique to Quiz. Not only colon colon. Perhaps the most important one is backticks. We have backticks in Quiz to create a literal object from many Smalltalk expressions. The other dialects don't have that. And something else we have is a syntax very similar to a byte arrays with a hash and parentheses. But if one of those numbers includes a dot, then it creates a float array instead of a byte array. That's also, I believe, unique to Quiz, and maybe there is some other small addition for convenience like that.
Good to
Well, I
know.
think one of the differences also is that you can use the return character as a message. That's something you cannot do in other Smalltalk, and I think it's just only that. I don't remember.
No, it's not only that. In Quiz, you can use any symbol that is not a letter as a binary selector, and any Unicode character. Okay, so you could use, I don't know, the set inclusion symbol that is like a little e, that an element belongs to a set in math, for instance, or the character for all, or exist, any math character, a math symbol like that, you can use it as a binary selector, and I believe that's unique to Quiz2. I'm not sure to what extent other small talks let you do that. And if you want to use an alphabet that is not the Latin alphabet, you can. You want to use Greek letters, or you want to use, I don't know, Arabic or whatever, then anything that is a letter in a Unicode alphabet can be used as a letter in selectors, in variable names, that kind of things. So to say what is a binary symbol and what is a part, what can be part of a selector, we ask Unicode, and Unicode knows that. So the range of names you can write in Quiz is much wider than in other dialects. That's on top of what Hernan said. Not only the return symbol, but any symbol.
Yeah, but having the return symbol as a selector, uh, I mean, to be able to do that, you have to change the syntax, the parser. I remember that because it's not only that you're using a symbol, but it's that special symbol. Is And I think
Yes,
there are other
yes.
ones that are not only
I,
the
one of
semicolon. No, the semicolon is not possible to use it as a message. I think
I believe the
the
not. I
semicolon,
believe
no,
no,
no.
no. But something that we did change the parser to be able to do is, for instance, if you do how was it? Yeah, the assignment operator can also be used as a selector.
That's right.
And if you do, for instance, a uh, equals minus b, it's ambiguous because it's not clear that if you mean minus b or equal minus. Okay, and it's usually best to do A space equal minus space B, or A space equal space minus B. But if you don't have spaces at all, Quiz has a preference to where you can change what that means. And I'm not sure other dialects can do that. Yeah, well, we tweak the parser at several places to give you more freedom.
No. So I was thinking about changing the syntax a little bit, tweak it a little bit to be more C compliant, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea. Well, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well,
You want
plus
to
plus
attract? Oh,
is
sorry.
a plus plus is something that in a way looks nice, but the problem is what it means.
Yeah.
It would be sending a message to a variable, but to the variable, not to the object stored in the variable.
That's right.
So, or it would be a macro that you can macro expand into a assign to A the result of A plus one, and then it's no longer Smalltalk syntax at all. The kind of trick that can be done by using Smalltalk syntax are good in a way, or fun and nice. Um, One thing that we cannot do easily today, for instance, is an integral or a sum, as in math. And you could do something like that if you made the integral sign or the summation sign a global, but
Yeah.
those are not letters. So they, according to the rules, they are binary selectors and not variable names. So there are still a couple of things we cannot do. If you want to start a sentence by saying for all, as in math, well, that for all, what is it? Is it a global? It is a class name? It is a math symbol, so it should be a selector. So we have, perhaps we could have a small set of Unicode math symbols that are globals and not binary selectors. Maybe that's something to be done at some time. Then for all or exist or integral or some could be class names, and then you can send them messages and write small talk that is also math.
They could be objects, just objects, you know.
Yeah, that's what I mean by being a global.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. Do you see some use case for having macros in Smalltalk?
For having what, sorry?
Macros, because you mentioned that earlier.
I don't, and I hope we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, because at least in C, I haven't used macros in other places than C and assembly language. And in C and assembly language, I believe you use macros for kind of inventing new syntax. Um, and the Smalltalk syntax is so simple that adding special syntaxes in the form of macros would ruin the experience, in my opinion. I don't think that would work well. Someone could try to do that. I don't think it. I don't know.
If you're okay with that, I will stop recording the video. It's fine for you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we can continue. We can continue, but I will stop there because it's already 1 hour.